Hello, and welcome back to the Aquascape Guide, where we cover all the systems needed to keep our planted tanks happy and healthy. If you didn't already know, my name is Phil, and I'm from the aquascapeguide.com. In this video series, we've already covered how to select a light for a planted aquarium, how to set up and dial in a CO2 system, how to provide nutrients to our planted tanks, and even how to test and adjust our water's chemistry. If you haven't seen those videos yet, you should totally go back and watch them, as all the systems you are learning about are interconnected. But today I wanted to talk about the importance of filtration and how to remove organics from the water to protect our livestock and also reduce algae. So the first thing we need to address is, what does a filter do? The filter's one job is to turn over the water in the aquarium, removing free-floating organics from the water column, which can be in the form of chemical compounds like ammonia or nitrites, or solids like dead plant matter and detritus. This turnover and the removal of organics protects our livestock and prevents algae. The filter achieves this through mechanical, biological, and chemical filtration. Mechanical filtration removes bigger things like detritus, dead leaf matter, fish poop, stuff like that. Biological filtration converts any ammonia or nitrites into nitrates, protecting livestock. And chemical filtration can be as simple as running some carbon to remove tannins from the water column. The water then returns to the aquarium less toxic and particle-free. Well, in theory, if you have filtration set up properly. There are a lot of different options on the market, so that leads us to, which filter should I buy? That answer is quite simple as it relates to turnover. No matter what filter you decide to go with or have access to, it is wise to have enough filtration to turn the entire aquarium's water volume over 10 times in 1 hour. Shoot, depending on the size of your tank, that might mean that you need to run 2 filters. Just know that gallons per hour rating, or GPH, of the filter is generally taken by the manufacturer with no sponges or biomedia in the filter at all. The manufacturers simply run the filter empty and take a turnover reading. So, when you load up the filter with sponges and biomedia, the turnover is going to decrease a bit. Not something to freak out about, just something to keep in mind when shopping for filters. It's better to have too much turnover than too little. Another reason why we want to shoot for 10 times turnover per hour is for circulation reasons. When dosing the EI method and injecting CO2, it's important to have all that nutrient-rich water moving around the tank. We want to make sure that there are no dead spots in the tank, where plants wouldn't have access to this nutrients, CO2, or fresh water. We at the Aquascape Guide recommend going with a canister filter, due to 1, they can easily achieve 10 times turnover per hour, and 2, they can be customized easily to our tank's needs. Now, we know we're going to get some hate for this one, but we do not suggest going with sponge filters. And we're kind of on the fence about hang-on back filters, or HOBs. They're not bad options for other applications, but just not for planted tanks. So let's talk about why not a sponge filter? Well, first, they're not going to achieve the 10 times turnover per hour that we're looking for. This leaves more toxic organic compounds floating around with your fish. This lack of turnover also prevents the sponge filter from polishing the water and removing free-floating particulates, which again is the filter's only job. Most sponge filters on the market come with a coarse sponge attached to them, which is better for flow, but then allows smaller particulate matter to pass right through them, only catching larger organic material like dead plants or leaves, or big amounts of detritus. Now, you can buy a finer sponge to swap out the coarser sponge that comes stock, but then that gets all gunked up, restricting flow, reducing its turnover, and again, effectiveness. Furthermore, there is no customizability to your tank's needs with sponge filters. Like, what if you needed to run carbon? Couldn't do that in a sponge filter. Or what if you wanted to run filter floss to polish your water super clear? Couldn't do that either. And unfortunately, we see this all the time with those starting out in the hobby, where the hobbyist rinses the sponge out with tap water, crashing their cycle. It's an honest mistake, but can be lethal to the tank and its inhabitants. We've also seen hobbyists bump the sponge while performing maintenance, and it then expels everything that it's been holding onto for a week within the tank, which again defeats the purpose. That, and you have all this rotting organic material that the sponge has collected sitting in your tank with your fish. We just don't get it. And lastly, which is more of an opinion, we just think they're super ugly in a tank. I mean, come on, we work really hard to make our tanks look super beautiful, and then we toss this massive black sponge hanging out in our tank. Seems kinda counterproductive. But again, we know this last part is more of an opinion, and to each their own. So then, what about HOB filters or hang-on back filters? In our humble opinion, they can be better than a sponge filter. but they still lack the filtration power and customizability that we appreciate from a canister. They can have higher turnover than a sponge filter, depending on which one you buy, but canisters still provide way more turnover. However, hang-on backs have some room to add things like mechanical, biological, and some chemical filtration, but again, nowhere close to the room we get within a canister filter. But if all you had access to was either a sponge filter or a hang-on back filter, we'd most likely recommend going with a hang-on back, as you'll probably get more turnover and a little bit of room for customizability that you just won't get with a sponge filter. And all of this leads us back to just buy a dang canister filter. Okay, in all seriousness though, we really love Fluval's lineup of canister filters. They come in all sorts of sizes, provide loads of turnover, you can control the flow of the water, and they have a great deal of customizability. Speaking of customizability, let's look at how to set up a canister filter. Most traditional canisters, aside from the mini ones, come with trays, and we need to load these trays up in a specific order. First, the water needs to pass through mechanical filtration. We should set up a series of sponges from coarse to medium to fine. But if you want your water super clear, then we add filter floss right after the fine sponges, which removes even the finest particulate matter in the water. The different size sponges will pull out any floating particulate matter in the water, scrubbing it clean before it hits the subsequent trays. This prevents the trays later in the line from getting all gunked up, and also allows us to really clean the sponges out without the risk of crashing our cycle, like we see with those using sponge filters sometimes. Now the second tray the water is going to flow through is biological filtration, or our biomedia. This comes in all sorts of shapes and sizes, and the more you can add, the better. Fluval's canister filters generally come with ceramic rings you can toss in the filter when cycling a new aquarium. You can sometimes even pick up more ceramic rings at your local fish store that are already pre-cycled. Now, this doesn't mean you don't have to cycle your aquarium. It just helps speed the process up a bit. Shoot, you know what? We need to do a video on cycling your tank. Hit the subscribe button to make sure you don't miss that video. Anywho, if you don't have access to ceramic rings, just make sure you use a very porous material like lava rock. Sometimes they have bio balls you can buy, or shoot, even something fancy like Seachem Matrix. Now every 4 to 6 months, we need to crack open the canister and service it. This just entails us rinsing and wringing out the sponges, or replacing them if they're looking sad, rinsing off the gunk from our biomedia if there is any, and we even use a toothbrush on the impeller and the housing to make sure there's no algae buildup that would restrict the flow of the pump. However, when servicing the canister, we need to use tank water and not tap water. The chlorine in the tap water will kill your beneficial bacteria, crashing your cycle. We like to siphon some of the tank water out into a 5-gallon bucket when processing a water change, and use that to dip and rinse everything out. Again, the biomedia houses all this beneficial bacteria which develops when cycling your tank. This bacteria is responsible for breaking down the ammonia and nitrites that your fish constantly produce into nitrates, which is a less harmful compound to our livestock. So again, just make sure you never rinse anything from your filter out in tap water. And one last note, you can never overfilter your aquarium, but you can definitely underfilter. Hence why we think the more biomedia or ceramic rings, or whatever you're using, the better. Now the last tray your water will flow through is reserved for chemical filtration. This could be something like active carbon, ammonia removers, crushed coral, anything like that. We at the Aquascape Guide don't use chemical filtration on a day-to-day basis. We generally just stack our canisters with tons of sponges and biomedia. But there may come a time where you need to run some carbon to remove tannins or chemicals out of the water. Or as talked about in our water chemistry video, which I'll put a link down in the description below, if your KH is too low and you want to add some calcium carbonate, aka crushed coral, to up your KH and pH, you have the room to do so. And we would just add it to the very last tray. Awesome, huh? Now something to think about, these trays need to be stacked in a specific order. With Fluval's canisters, the water flows down to the bottom of the canister and makes its way up through all the trays, out the top. But you need to check the manual for your canister filter to make sure you stack the trays in the proper order. The last reason we like canisters is equipment that would normally go in your tank can be added to the canister or canister tubing. Like some canisters come with built-in UV sterilizers that help protect livestock from disease and infections. And sorry if we butcher the name, but Oase filters, if that's how you call them, come with a pre-filter that you can pull out without even having to crack open your canister. And shoot, some of their filters even come with a built-in heater. Now we love this because that's one less thing we have to have in our tank. If your filter doesn't come with a built-in heater, you can always attach an inline one to the hose of your canister to keep it out of your tank. We can also add an inline diffuser or reactor to the canister tubing for CO2 injection. Some of these inline methods of diffusion for CO2 work so well, like Nylock G's inline reactor, that you don't even see microbubbles floating around your tank, keeping the water super clear. So, no more Sprite water. Yeah! In our humble opinion, the less equipment we have in our aquariums, the more our eyes can focus on the plants and the livestock. And that's pretty much it for filtration. Pretty simple, huh? Just try to find a filter that will turn your aquarium's water over 10 times within 1 hour. We want to make sure that all the fertilizer and CO2 enriched water is flowing through our tanks and making it to all of our plants. Furthermore, we suggest canister filters like Fluvals because they come in all sorts of sizes, provide loads of turnover, you can control the flow of them, and they have a great deal of customizability. Fluval's canisters have lasted us years, and the parts can be replaced if something breaks or wears out. And lastly, equipment can be built into the canisters or added to the canister hoses to keep equipment out of our tanks, allowing us to focus on the natural beauty we have created. And you know what? Shoot, it's been a few months since I've opened my canister and rinsed it out. I should go do that. But you're probably thinking to yourself, dude, there's so much to remember from these last 6 videos. You're not just gonna leave me here, are ya? So let's do a little recap in the next video with a cheat sheet you can download that summarizes our entire approach to keeping planted tanks. How does that sound? Okay, gotta go crack open my canister real quick. We'll see you in the next video. Later, scapers.